Candy with eyes to Jesus.blogspot.com, and welcome as we finish the book of Daniel today. We have been doing a Bible study going through the whole book of Daniel, and today we are up to the very last chapter in the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 12. So if you would like to follow along with me, I am in the Young's literal translation of the Bible. The Young's literal translation of the Bible is a literal translation of the Bible translated from the same superior text that the King James Version of the Bible were translated from. So, if you want to follow along, if you want to follow the same translation, I'm in the Young's literal translation, and turn to Daniel chapter 12. Now, we're going to back up and do the last verse in Daniel chapter 11, because in a way, verse 45 of Daniel chapter 11 should maybe be the first verse in Daniel chapter 12. So, verse 45, because Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 starts with, "And at that time." At what time? Well, that's what verse 45 of Daniel chapter 11 tells us. So let's get right into this. So beginning with chapter 11, verse 45, it says, "And he," this is Antichrist, "planted the tents of his palace between the seas and the holy desirable mountain, and hath come unto his end, and there is no helper to him." All right, so of course we can parallel this. We did parallel this with some other scriptures in our last study. If you haven't watched our study in Daniel chapter 11, I know it's a long study, but please watch it. The first half hour or so of the study is when we were going through the historical parts of chapter 11, and then the rest of the video after that goes into future parts. All right, so let's parallel this with 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. Okay, so 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 1 through 8 says, "And we ask you, brethren, in regard to the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ and of our gathering together unto him," this is the rapture, "that ye be not quickly shaken in mind, nor be troubled, neither through spirit, neither through word, neither through letters, as through us, as that the day of Christ hath arrived. Let not anyone deceive you in any manner." Don't be deceived in any way that the rapture is imminent. It was what this is telling us. It says, if you get it through a word, or even if you get it as if it was a letter from an apostle, no matter how it's told to you, don't let anyone deceive you in any way into thinking that the rapture is imminent, because the rapture is not imminent until certain things happen first. So verse 3. "Let not anyone deceive you in any manner, because if the falling away may not come first, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of destruction, who is opposing and raising himself up above all called God or worshipped." We read about that in Daniel chapter 11. "So that he in the sanctuary of God, as God hath sat down, showing himself off that he is God, the day doth not come." What day doth not come? The day of Christ, of verse 2. So the two things that have to happen before the rapture is a great falling away, that's a great apostasy of Christians, and that the Antichrist is revealed. And he's to be revealed as a son of destruction, or as a lawless one. And this is, as the King James puts it, the son of perdition. All right, so continuing on verse 5, "Do ye not remember that being yet with you, these things I said to you? And now what is keeping down, ye have known, for he has been revealed in his own time." So what has to happen before Antichrist is revealed? It just said, well, one, we have to have a great falling away, and the abomination of desolation happens, and that's what reveals him. And that's what that just described to us, was the abomination of desolation beginning. Verse 7, "For the secret of the lawlessness doth already work," because we already have antichrists in the world, and these antichrists are of Antichrist who shall come. They're of the same spirit. All right, "doth already work, only he who is keeping down now will hinder till he may be out of the way." Everybody wonders who that he is. It's basic grammar. Follow the antecedent to the pronoun he. It's still referring to Antichrist. This is not the Holy Spirit. This is not the church. This is not Christians. He is Antichrist. We haven't been given a new antecedent to the pronoun he, so we still follow the same antecedent, the same he it's been talking about, which is Antichrist. So Antichrists, is the one who is keeping down or will hinder till he may be out of the way. And as we studied in our last study in chapter 11, out of the way is when Antichrist receives his fatal head wound, as we read about in the book of Revelation. Meanwhile, at that same time in Daniel chapter 12, we have Satan, the dragon, and his angels fighting against Michael and his angels. Satan and his fallen angels lose and are cast to the earth. Then Satan, the dragon, gets in a much closer relationship with Antichrist, thus turning him into a son of perdition, or the son of destruction, also known as the lawless one. So verse 8, and then shall be revealed the lawless one, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the manifestation of his presence. So Antichrist will be destroyed at the Battle of Armageddon, as will all the enemies in that battle at the second coming of Jesus Christ. Okay, so that's where it means at the end of verse 45 here in Daniel 11, and hath come unto his end, and there is no helper to him. He has sealed his fate. The fate is sealed. He's only got 3.5 years left until he is destroyed at that point. And how do I know that timeline? Because Daniel chapter 12 and Revelation chapter 12, as well as Daniel chapter 9 and many other scriptures in the Bible, give us that timeline. All right, so now let's read verse 45 again, and then we're going to move into verse 1 so you can see how they play together. And he planteth the tents of his palace between the seas and the holy desirable mountain, and hath come unto his end, and there is no helper to him. And at that time stand up doth Michael, the great head, who is standing up for the sons of thy people, and there hath been a time of distress, such as hath not been since there hath been a nation till that time, and at that time do thy people escape, everyone who is found written in the book. And this book is elsewhere in the Bible. It's called Written in the Book, and elsewhere in the Bible is also called the Lamb's Book of Life. So everyone whose name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life at this time escapes. This is a middle tribulation rapture, as we paralleled in our last study in Daniel chapter 11, as we paralleled with 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verses 51 through 52, along with Revelation chapter 10 verse 7, Revelation chapter 11 verses 15 through 18. Okay, and here we have how we read about in the rapture that the dead are first, and then we which are alive. We have the same order right here, starting with verse 2. And the multitude of those sleeping in the dust of the ground do awake, the dead, some to life age during, and some to reproaches, to abhorrence age during. And those teaching do shine as the brightness of the expanse, and those justifying the multitude as stars to the age and forever. These are Christians receiving their rewards. Verse 4, and thou, O Daniel, hide the things and seal the book. How long is the book of Daniel sealed? Till the time of the end. Many do go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied. The book of Daniel is unsealed. We can understand it now. We see it because why? We are in the time that it's ascribed, where many do go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied. We are there. So many go to and fro. We have our cars, we have the trains, we have airplanes. We also have virtually going to and fro via Zoom, online, etc., right? I mean, even the name, Zoom, right? And then knowledge is multiplied. We are in the information age. And of course, now the free speech on the internet is heavily being squelched, but nonetheless, we are in the information age. If the information age is truly coming to an end, then we're here, folks. Otherwise, this is just a blip. But we are here. We are here at the end, where many do go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied. So, what else do we have? Some other parallel scriptures to this, okay? We'll back up to Daniel chapter 11, verse 45, and then also Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. We just took a look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. Let's also review timeline-wise at the time when he's planting the tents of his palace between the seas and the holy desirable mountain. What time is that? That parallels, if you turn a page or a few back, to Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, which says, and he, Antichrist, hath strengthened a covenant. Notice it doesn't say he made the covenant. I think the King James says confirmed the covenant, but literally it's strengthened. So this 7-year covenant could be made by a purely political personality. But remember, Antichrist is a religious personality who comes into the political sphere. He is both religious and political. I know who the Antichrist is. If you've been following along in my Daniel study, and if you've watched my Revelation study, you too should have figured out who Antichrist is as well. But verse 27 of chapter 9, and he hath strengthened a covenant with many 1 week. And remember, we read that that is like our decade is 10 years, that the Hebrew word week here actually means 7 years. And in the midst of the week, or in the middle of the 7 years, he causeth the sacrifice and present to cease. And by the wing of abominations he is making desolate, even till the consummation, and that which is determined is poured on the desolate one. So in other words, and he will come unto his end, and there is no helper to him, at the end of verse 45 in chapter 11, or how we read about he will be destroyed, as we read about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. That time clock starts once he begins that abomination of desolation that we just read about in Daniel 9:27 and Daniel 11:45 and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So, I talked a lot about, or mentioned several times in our Daniel 11 study, Matthew chapter 24 and Mark chapter 13. Now, in understanding the chronological order of Matthew 24 and Mark 13, you turn to Luke. Okay, Luke chapter 21 is mainly the middle tribulation rapture, and Luke chapter 17 is mainly the second coming. So both of those, at least in part or almost in entirety, are in Mark 13 and Matthew 24. But if you use Luke 21 and Luke 17 as a template, then you see the timeline clearly, and then you understand Matthew 24 and Mark 13. So since Luke chapter 21 is one that is actually dealing with the middle of the 7-year tribulation and the rapture area and all around that area, let's take a look at that today. So let's go to Luke chapter 21, and we're going to take a look at verses 20 through 24. All right, Luke 21, 20 through 24 says, and then those in Judea, that's Jerusalem, let them flee to the mountains, and those in her midst, let them depart out. For those in the countries, let them not come into her, because these are the days of vengeance, to fulfill all things that have been written. And woe to those with child, and to those giving suck in those days, for there shall be great distress on the land, and wrath on this people. And they shall fall by the mouth of the sword, and shall be led captive to all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down by nations, till the times of the nations be fulfilled. Okay, first of all, notice here it says that this will be a time of great distress. Going back to chapter 12, verse 1, it says that this is a time of distress. The time of distress is one of the terms that the literal translation of the Bible gives for the second half of the tribulation. The King James Version will often say the time of trouble, but here we have the time of distress. So this is the time of distress. So verse 45 and verse 1 here in Daniel 11 and 12 are talking about the same thing that we just read about in Luke 21, verses 20 through 24. And we are reading that that is the beginning of the abomination of desolation. That is also paralleled with Daniel 9:27. Okay, so now again, verse 1, and at that time, at what time? This time of distress, when the abomination of desolation is beginning. And at that time, stand up doth Michael, the great head. Okay, let's stop there. When is this? This is during the time of distress. So while the abomination of desolation is taking place in Jerusalem, we have Star Wars going on in outer space above our heads. Okay, and that's what this is talking about. Michael, the great head, stands up. And how does he stand up for the sons of thy people? In other words, how does Michael, the archangel, stand up for the people of God? Well, we read about that in more detail in Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. So let's go to Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9, which says, and there came war in the heaven. Michael and his messengers, that's a literal translation from angelos, angels, messengers, did war against the dragon. And the dragon did war in his messengers, so Satan and his fallen angels. And they, Satan and his fallen angels, did not prevail, nor was their place found any more in the heaven. And the great dragon was cast forth, the old serpent, in case you're confused who that is, the old serpent from the garden, who is called Devil And the adversary, Satan, is actually translated literally to adversary, who is leading astray the whole world. He was cast forth to the earth, and his messengers were cast forth with him. So even before he's cast to the earth, notice it says that the adversary, the devil, is leading astray the whole world. That is the lawlessness or mystery of iniquity that is already working right now. We people of God who have come out of the fog and we're using our brains, we look around and we see there's the sheep and the sheeple. And the sheeple are actually the goats that are going to go off to the left-hand side and into judgment, into the Gehenna fire. The sheeple are those who are just blindly following what the talking heads are telling them. Blindly following what their corrupted wolves in sheep's clothing churchianity churches are teaching them. These sheeple don't think for themselves. These sheeple depend on other people to do their thinking for them because they don't trust their God-given intellect to use it for themselves. Those sheeple are just little wolflings in sheep's clothing, heading on their way on the wide road to destruction. All right, so Satan, he's deceiving the whole world right now. All right, but soon he's physically going to be walking this world because he will be cast out of the second heaven, being outer space. He was already cast out of the first heaven, being God's throne, where he was only able to go there at certain times to present himself, as we read about in Job chapter 1, for example. All right, so again, verse 45 and verse 1 together. See if you can now see the abomination of desolation and the middle tribulation rapture. And he planteth the tents of his palace between the seas and the holy desirable mountain, and hath come unto his end, and there is no helper to him. And at that time stand up doth Michael, the great head, who is standing up for the sons of thy people. That's the children of God. And there hath been a time of distress. That's the great tribulation, the time of trouble. That's the second 3.5 years, as defined in both Old and New Testaments. Such as hath not been since there hath been a nation till that time. And at that time, at the time of the abomination of desolation, when Antichrist is revealed as the lawless one, as a son of destruction, as we see in Thessalonians chapter 2, at that time, do thy people, the people of God, escape everyone who is found written in the book. And the multitude of those sleeping in the dust of the ground do awake, some to life age during, and some to reproaches, to abhorrence age during. And those teaching do shine as the brightness of the expanse. And those justifying the multitude as stars to the age forever and ever. In other words, those Christians who are following their calling from the Lord God and are doing their work for the reign of God, they receive their rewards. And this goes with in Revelation chapter 11, verses 15 through 18, where it talks about the saints receiving their rewards. Let's turn to that really quick. The middle tribulation rapture in the book of Revelation. So I want to go to Revelation chapter 11. And before we go there, let's review chapter 10, verse 7, where it says, chapter 10, verse 7 of Revelation, but in the days of the voice of the seventh messenger, so in other words, when the seventh trumpet sounds, when he may be about the sound, the secret of God may be finished, as he did declare to his own servants, to the prophets. One of the places he's declaring it is right here in Daniel chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. And the secret of God, or the mystery of God, you read about that happening at the seventh trumpet as laid out plainly in Scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 51 through 52. Now let's read the secret being revealed. Chapter 11, verses 15 through 18. And the seventh messenger did sound, and there came great voices in heaven, saying, the kingdoms of this world did become those of the Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign to the ages of the ages. And the 24 elders who before God are sitting upon their thrones did fall upon their faces, and did bow before God, saying, we give to thee thanks, O Lord God, the Almighty, who art and who wast and who art coming, because thou hast taken thy great power and didst reign. And the nations were angry, and thy anger did come. And the time of the dead rise first, to be judged, and to give the reward to thy servants, to the prophets, and to the saints, and to those fearing thy name. That is where we see the reward portion that we read about in Daniel. All right, to the small and to the great, and to destroy those who are destroying the land. How is the land being destroyed? Now, some people think it means corrupting the earth, but no, literally it is destroying many ways. One of the many ways being chemtrails. It's completely destroying forests massively. It's ruining people's health. It's causing ecological disaster. Verse 3, where it says in Daniel chapter 12, and those teaching to shine as the brightness of the expanse, and those justifying the multitude of stars to the age forever and ever. That's the saints receiving their reward. Now let's continue with verse 4 in our Daniel chapter 12 study. And thou, O Daniel, hide the things and seal the book till the time of the end. Many do go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied. As we discussed this just a little bit ago, we are there. You look at those maps that have the little triangle on it, says you are here. Well, folks, you are here. Daniel chapter 12 verse 4, where it says many do go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied. The book of Daniel is unsealed. We see it. We understand it. Verse 5. And I have looked, I, Daniel, and lo, 2 others are standing, one here at the edge of the flood, and one there at the edge of the flood, so that's being a river. And who are those 2 others? Those are 2 spirit beings sent by God. Verse 6, and he saith to the one clothed in linen, who is upon the waters of the flood. All right, so one of the spirit beings is saying in Daniel's hearing, no doubt for Daniel to hear and write down for us to read, he says to the other spirit being, till when is the end of these wonders? So when there's this whole abomination of desolation and this serious time of distress, this time of trouble, when does it end? Verse 7, and I hear the one clothed in linen, who is upon the waters of the flood, and he doth lift up his right hand and his left unto the heavens, and sweareth by him who is living to the age that, and here's what he says, after a time, times, and a half, and at the completion of the scattering of the power of thy holy people, finished are all these. Now, scriptural prophetic terms, time, times and a half. A time is 3.5 years. And we have verification of that because the Bible also gives it the same timeline to us in the amount of days of 1,290 days, and also the amount of months as in 42 months. And they all are referring to 3.5 years. So this is, we read about how verse 45 of chapter 11 is the beginning of the abomination of desolation, where our Antichrist is disrupting the 7-year covenant in the middle of the covenant, as we read about in Daniel 9:27. And now we got 3.5 years after the revealing of Antichrist. And isn't it amazing? Antichrist will be revealed, but most of the world won't see it. Only those who shine as a brightness with the light of Christ flooding through them, the true children of God, will see it. And we are the massive minority. I'm talking probably a 1% number if we're lucky. All right, so, and then it says after a time, times and a half. After a time, times and a half, 3.5 years, and at the completion of the scattering of the people, of the power of thy holy people, finished are these. So the Christians at this point, we're raptured. But then Antichrist is going after the Jews and the people who become Christians after the rapture. Okay, so this is what some people would refer to as the time of the Gentiles. All right, so this parallels with Luke 21 where we read. Let's go back to Luke 21. And this parallels with Luke 21 verse 24, which says, and they shall fall by the mouth of the sword, and shall be led captive to all the nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down by nations, till the times of nations be fulfilled. Also known as in the King James Version, the times of the Gentiles. The times of the nations to be fulfilled. And when are these times of the nations fulfilled? After a time, times and a half, and at the completion of the scattering of the power of the holy people, finished are all of these, when Jerusalem is trodden down of the nations. Verse 8 in Daniel chapter 12, continuing on, and I have heard, and I do not understand. And I say, so now Daniel heard these 2 spirit beings talking, and now Daniel's saying, well, wait a minute. Oh, my Lord, lowercase l, so this is a term of reverence, not worship. Oh, my Lord, what is the latter end of these? So he's like, no, I don't get it. When does this end? He's not understanding. Verse 9, And he saith, one of the spirit beings answers Daniel, and he saith, Go, Daniel, for hidden and sealed are the things till the time of the end. So where did we see that? Well, that's paralleling with verse 4. And thou, O Daniel, hide the things and seal the book till the time of the end. Many do go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied. You are here. We are going to and fro, and we are in the information age. Verse 10. Purify themselves, yea, make themselves white, yea, refined are many. And the wicked have done wickedly, and none of the wicked understand. And those acting wisely do understand. The Christians, with the light of Jesus Christ shining through them, who truly are seeking the truth, will see how the book of Daniel is unsealed. And we see plainly what it says. But those who still have the scales upon their eyes, they can't see the obvious. Verse 11, and from the time of the turning aside of the perpetual sacrifice and to the giving out of the desolation of abomination, so he's saying from the time of the abomination, desolation of abomination, our days, now he's giving it to them in days, because remember Daniel's like time, times and a half a time, what is that? So now he's saying, okay, let me give it to you in days. So from the abomination of desolation, our days, 1,290. 1,290 days is how long? It is 3.5 years. So he said, okay, you don't understand time, times and a half a time. Let me tell it to you in days. It's going to be 1,290 days. 1,290 days is 3.5 years. Verse 12. Oh, the blessedness of him who is waiting earnestly, and doth come to the days 1,335. So then, blessed is he. Now this is for those who became Christians or children of God after the rapture, who have to endure through the second half of the tribulation, saying, okay, blessed is he if he makes it not just through those second 3.5 years of the 7-year tribulation, but 2 months out past that. Because 1,335 days is those 3.5 years, but with another 2 months added to the end of that. And why is that? These 2-month period, this would be the very end of the second 3.5 year period of the Great Tribulation, the time of distress. It's the Battle of Armageddon, where Jesus Christ comes back, his second coming. So then there's going to be massive carnage and dead bodies all over the land. That's what we read about in Mark 13 and Matthew 24 and the book of Revelation about the great feast of the birds, and how the birds will be gathered by the Lord to descend down and begin eating up all the dead bodies, because the Battle of Armageddon, there's going to be a lot of massive death. So this 2-month time period could very well be a time period that's given for the birds to pick the bones clean, and then for the people who are left on the earth to go ahead and start cleaning up and burying the bones and getting everything cleaned up, getting the land cleaned up. It's like a transition period from one government to another government. And then will come in what? The Messianic reign, the 1,000-year millennium of peace. So 2 months after Armageddon, that is probably when the 1,000-year millennium begins. So blessed is he who waits patiently, who became a child of God after the rapture, who is just referring to here, who waits patiently, and then he will see the beginning of the reign of the 1,000 years millennium of peace. Verse 13, and thou go on to the end, then thou dost rest, and dost stand in thy lot at the end of the days. So he said, okay, go on, Daniel, then you're going to die, but then you're going to stand in your lot at the end of the days. Well, Daniel's going to be amongst the people of God who gets raptured, the dead who will rise first. And the Bible talks about that with raptured Christians. It says that after we're raptured, it says, so shall we ever be with the Lord. So at Jesus' physical second coming to the earth at the end of the 7-year tribulation during the Battle of Armageddon, we Christians who were raptured 3.5 years prior to that returned to the earth with Jesus at his second coming. For so shall we ever be with the Lord. And this concludes our study through the book of Daniel. I hope it blessed you in some way, and have a blessed day.